So in this introduction, we're just going to go quickly over some assistive technology concepts just to get you going. Um, a definition of assistive technology is a broad range of devices, services, or strategies that can help an individual with a disability to access their environment and solve a problem for them. So the key word really is any device or strategy. Um, there are multiple federal legislations that provide funding for assistive technology, but the two key ones for the education system is the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and that covers students with a Section 508 mandate. But most students will fall under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, which guarantees students with disabilities a free and appropriate public education, also known as FAPE. Students within this legislation develop what's called an individualized education program. And there are actually multiple classifying categories of disability for a student with an IEP. So a student needs to meet the criteria for one of these multiple classifications. Within the assistive technology world, they use language called low and high incidence, and that simply refers to the frequency of occurrence of this particular disability classification in the general population. So, for example, a traumatic brain injury would be considered a low incidence disability, while a learning disability would be considered a high incidence classification. All right, so here is a general model that assistive technology uses. First, it strives to look at the human, their physical characteristics, their cognitive, mental status, their emotional functioning. Then they look at the activities that this individual needs to do, their leisure, their work roles, their hobbies, and then it looks at the context, so the environment where these are done. Is it home? Is it school? And then it looks at the assistive technology within this particular environment. So it tries to be aware of the environment also. And a good point to note is that context also involves the people in the person's life and what their support staff. And so for a student, that might be the teaching staff, and how knowledgeable they are in supporting the student. So a quick look at the human aspect of this model. There are sensory systems, your five senses, plus two internal ones. So for example, like vision, hearing, posture, and movement, all information gathered from the outside world goes into the central processing, which is how your brain receives this outside information and processes it. So perception is related to the brain's activity to interpret outside stimuli. So for example, your vision might be clear, you don't need glasses, but when you look at a page, the letters are flipped around and turned upside down. So that's an issue with perception, not with your vision system. The next aspect is cognition, and that's related to your ability to recall language, your problem solving, all those higher order types of thinking. And so we're going to go a little bit deeper into this for 1 second. We're going to take a sidebar about memory and chunking. So there are many different types of memory, but there's the two most important ones are the ones that we're going to cover now are working memory and long-term memory. So long-term memory is information that you've acquired in the past and it's stored away in your filing cabinet, while your working memory works mostly in your prefrontal cortex, and that's immediate memory for what it is that you're doing right now. So they used to think that we have seven slots of working memory, when in actuality we only have four slots in our working memory at one time. So it's important to have chunks. So a chunk is a collection of information that the brain can quickly access and use. So we're going to do a little exercise just to go and have you experience what a chunk is like. Okay. So I want you to, in a minute, pause the video. I want you to grab a piece of paper and a pencil, and I want you to write down what you ate at your last meal. All right, go ahead and do that now. Okay, so now that you're back, I want you to reflect a little bit on how that was for you. Was it easy for you to write letters? Was it easy for you to write the words? Did you have to think about the spelling, or could you just focus on recalling back to your last meal? So all these things, like the motor skill of writing a letter, that's a chunk that you established in early childhood. The ability to spell, that's a chunk that you established later on in your early education, hopefully. So all these little chunks start to become aggregated and become bigger and bigger. And what happens sometimes with children with disabilities or not disabled children, they don't have these chunks pre-established, and so they're using some of their working memory slots to complete those tasks that should be automatic. And it takes away one or two or three of these slots from higher order things like problem solving and planning and higher order thinking. So just something to think about when you're looking at your students and their cognition. All right. So to go back to the next part, which is psychosocial. So their motivation, their identity, what makes them tick, how excited are they to come to school every day? Are they stressed? There are a lot of studies that are coming out now about the effects of cortisol being released and long-term stress on the brain and its effect on memory. And then motor control, motor planning. Can you execute what it is that your brain wants to do? And the effectors relate to your muscle and your physical ability to move. Sometimes students with cerebral palsy have a hard time controlling their tone and their strength, or they fatigue quickly. So that's a little bit about the human. When it all goes well, it goes well. But when it doesn't, we have a lot to work on. So assistive technology can either be considered low technology, which is just, it doesn't require any batteries or electronics, and it's pretty simple to use and is low cost. It may also be mid-tech, which often runs on batteries and is a little bit more complicated than low-tech, but still fairly easy to integrate into a classroom. And then there's high-tech, and this usually involves computers, tablet devices, more complicated software. And although it's able to do more, it is definitely more difficult to implement and has a higher learning curve in its use. So similar to the HAT model and assistive technology within the educational system, there's the SET model that's applied, and you'll see that a lot of the areas here are similar to the ones in the HAT model. So at first you look at the student and you think about each one of those human aspects and what are their strengths and weaknesses. You look at the environment. Where is the student during the day? What's their classroom like? What is their environment like? Does it support their learning? Then you look at the tasks that they need to do. Are they taking social studies? Do they need to flip through a textbook? Do they need to read that textbook? What are the writing demands like? And then you try and look at the tools. And so which ones might assist the student in overcoming their weaknesses. So this is where a lot of the problem solving happens, and actually also it happens here where you might, as a teacher, reconsider the task. Maybe asking a student to do a particular task is not the best way to meet your learning goals. And we'll talk about this later, but this is where universal design for learning can really um, be implemented. So this is a general idea of the evaluation process. And you'll notice that it's cyclical because it really is never ending. Not necessarily. We're going to start here where the team decides to explore assistive technology. The student is struggling in some way. Then they'll apply the SET model to identify a possible tool that'll help meet an identified weakness. Uh, the team will then try a trial period with a device or a tool or a strategy, and then come back and reassess. Was it effective? Did it help the student? If it wasn't, then they might go through this process again to try and identify a different tool. Or if it was successful, they will go through the process of trying to procure a device either within the school, or they may need to reach out to the district or central offices for device procurement. Then there's always the process of providing ongoing training. Initially, it'll just be in general device use. How do you turn it on? How do you save things? How do you navigate? And then it turns into more of an implementation. When can I use it? How can I use it better? And then you monitor for needed modifications. A student in third grade has very different tasks and demands than a high school student. So the team may need to start exploring assistive technology again once the tool no longer meets the environment or the student's needs. So it's ongoing. And then just a quick look at the SAMR model. So SAMR is a model that's used for educational technology integration, and pretty much so this is like a hierarchy with the more simple leading to the more complex. And assistive technology really sits in the more basic substitution realm where you're pretty much adapting what it is that's happening in the classroom to allow a student with a disability to use it. Whereas universal design for learning starts to build on more sophisticated use of technology and really changing the classroom dynamics. So just to recap, the definition of AT is any device or service that will assist a student with a disability to access their curriculum. There are two key pieces of legislation, IDEA and the Rehabilitation Act. Students under IDEA need to fall under the disability classifications in order to qualify for AT. There is a range of devices, low, mid, or high tech, and these vary on their complexity. The SET model is a framework that's used to locate a tool based on the student's strengths and weaknesses, their environment, and the tasks that they need to complete. And the AT process is cyclical and often changes depending on the environment and the task. So it's a moving target. Up next, we're going to work on completing your article reading, and there are two assignments. The Here's Looking at You kid will have you look at the human aspect and try and identify strengths and weaknesses for each of the disability categories. And the SET case study will allow you to explore 3 different students and try and apply the SET model into one of the case studies that you choose. So good luck.